Hi everybody. It occurred to me recently that we've managed to get to around about 60 videos on this channel without ever really having discussed anything about French ornamentation yet. I don't quite know how that happened, but panic not, today is your lucky day. I've chosen a really short minuet from Marais Book 4, and I thought we'd use it as a sort of introduction to the symbols of French ornamentation, the symbols that Marais in particular uses. What do they mean? How does that translate into the way that we play? And how do we make ornaments sound as though they are parts of the music and not as though they're just places where somebody's told us to wiggle a finger, so we'd better do it, but it sort of gets in the way of the melody that we were hoping to play. So I think one of the main things to bear in mind always when you're looking at ornamentation and when you're trying to work out which finger to wiggle on which string and where, and does it come on the beat, and do I start on the upper note, and all of that kind of stuff. The main aim, the main thing that you should have in mind is that the whole point of this stuff is to be elegant. So if we find that ornaments sound as though they've just been kind of stuck on as an afterthought, we've missed the point. We've got to make them sound as though they're an integral part of a really elegant piece. So the question, in what way is this elegant, is going to come up frequently, and I think it's one that you could really helpfully just bear in mind at all times. In what way does this ornament add elegance to this particular point in the piece? So really, starting at the absolute beginning, let's think about the symbols, and let's just think about why these things are here. So here are the notes in this minuet, just played absolutely as they're on the page. You absolutely cannot play your French minuet like that. Mr. Marais would be turning in his grave. So what are we going to do to make it elegant? Well, the very first thing we're going to do goes absolutely without saying. So we're not going to play our quavers straight. We're going to be terribly French about them, terribly laid back about them, and just swing them a little bit. Already, it's just got a kind of grace to it that it didn't have before. So that's a good way of thinking about inégal. Not, I've got to make this lumpy, or I've got to make it sound like I've got one leg longer than the other. I've got to make it sound elegant and graceful. So that is the aim. In the second bar, the first note of that bar has a sharp sign before it. It's got a 1 before it for fingering. And then it's got what I call a tadpole after it, floating after the minim. That's a trill, and the tadpole applies to the note before the ornament sign. So the trill applies to the C sharp. And for our purposes, a trill is always going to start on the upper note, so the note above the note that's printed. So actually, on the downbeat of bar 2, you are not going to play a C sharp with the first finger, you're going to play a D with the second finger, and trill down. And I think this is a good point for people. Often say when they're learning things, I hear people say, I'm going to learn it without the ornaments first, and then I'll put the ornaments in once I know my way around. And I understand that as a principle of sort of thinking, well, I want to just get to know it a bit, and I want to work out the fingering, and I want to make sure I can understand the melody, and I know the piece before I start to decorate it. But the problem is that if you don't put the ornaments in from the beginning, they fundamentally change the fingering. So you can quite often find that you've learnt it very happily with whatever fingering you've come up with, and then you come to add the ornaments, and you need not the note that's printed, but you need the note above. And if you haven't thought that through ahead, you've not left yourself enough fingers to play the ornament with. So I would be wary of learning pieces and then adding the ornamentation as though it's a sort of extra thing to put on the top. I think you're safer to learn it slowly, but with everything in there, so that you've really thought about actually how you are going to approach each ornament, making sure you've got enough fingers for each thing. So I would aim. It's fundamentally different, isn't it, to aim for a D at the start of bar 2 than aiming for the C sharp. Okay, so the next pair of quavers have a 4 as a fingering, and then the 2 little dots above, that's not an ornament sign at all. That just tells you that we're on the 2nd string, we're playing the E up here as opposed to playing it there. The next note at the beginning of the next bar is a D, the O above it is open string, and the E above it is an enflé. Now, this is arguably the least clear, or the most debatable, if you like, ornament symbol. So in the preface to each of his books, Marais explains at some length, he basically says, nobody understands my music, and there are all these players who play it without the necessary elegance. They don't understand the need for appropriate ornamentation, they don't know what to put in where, and I'm so fed up of hearing this stuff played badly that I've had to invent my own symbols to show you where to put the appropriate sorts of ornaments and how to do them. So he introduces the symbols that he's using at the beginning of each book. And at the beginning of book 3, he introduces the enflé. And if you don't happen to have all 5 books of Marais to hand with all their prefaces, or perhaps your French is rustier than mine, there's a really good translation of this into English published by Corda Music. And I'll just read you what it says for the enflé. It comes at the beginning of book 3. So, this means that you must express or swell the bow stroke by putting more or less pressure on the string, according to the demands of the piece. And that can be sometimes on the beginning of the beat, or on the value of the dot after the note, according to where the mark is. So it's an extra pressure applied to the bow, so it's giving extra weight, I hesitate to use the word accent, but extra something on that note. And it's really important where the E is written. So in this particular piece, all of the E's are written actually just above the note that they apply to. But sometimes, particularly on dotted notes, the E isn't written over the note, it's written over the dot. So the pressure implied by the enflé comes not at the beginning of the note, but partway through on the dot. So the positioning of it is really crucial. And he says, in this way, one gives feeling to pieces which would be too uniform without it. So there's quite a lot of subjectivity in there. But the main point of the ornament seems to be to add weight, to add some kind of emphasis to the note that it's on. And it's to do it with the bow, not with the left hand, and it seems to be to do it with pressure rather than with speed. So that's the E at the beginning of bar 3. We'll think about exactly how it will come out in a minute. There's a cross at the beginning of bar 4. That's a mordant. And a mordant starts on the note that's printed, moves down to the note below, and comes back to the note that's printed. And generally, again for our purposes today, it's a single wiggle. We'll just do one printed note, wiggle down, and come back to the printed note. Nothing in the next bar. Penultimate bar of the line, C sharp with a 1 above it. We've seen this before, the trill. Open string D. Here's an enflé on the top A. And then a trill. And the trill is slurred, bowing-wise, into the previous crotchet. And the crotchet with an enflé on the top is the note that you would start your trill on. The trill is on the G. You would start on the A. And you're already playing it because it's a notated crotchet with the enflé on it. So what do? We use that printed note, it becomes the appoggiatura of the trill we're about to play, and we trill down from it onto the G. So that bar, so you don't re-emphasise the beginning of the trill. You keep the bow moving, keep slurring, and you trill down onto the note that's got the trill on it because you're already playing the upper note. And then the last bar of that section, it's a double stopped chord, there's a trill on it, and it's really clearly attached to the upper note. It is possible when you're playing, when you're double stopping, for there to be a trill on both notes. It's jolly inconvenient because you have to wiggle two fingers at the same time. It's possible for the trill to be on the bottom one. So the notation in these things is really, really clear. So the trill is clearly on the top note. We're going to start on the note above the printed one. So we'll start on the F, trill down to the E. So those are your ornaments in the first section. The second section, the P stands for poussé, push bow. There aren't any in this piece, but a T would indicate tire or back bow. And there's an enflé on the first note of the bar. Mordant. Trill, starting on the upper note. Enflé on the first beat. That's a fingering, a bar from the one that's at the top of the chord to the E on the top string. Now, here's another really classic example of if we learnt this without the ornamenting, we would probably put a 3 on the C sharp and a 4 on the A, and then when we come to add the trill, we have no fingers left. So he's really helpfully notated that you need a 3 on the A at the bottom. It leaves you with everybody's favourite trilling finger, the 4th finger, to trill down to the C sharp at the top. So the trill is really clearly marked again as the top note of the 2. So the 3rd finger on the bottom, 2nd finger on the C sharp, and you've got your 4 with which to play the trill. Okay, so we've talked through them. How do we make it sound as though they are an integral part of the piece? Not make it sound as though, okay, I'm going along with my tune, and now there's a tadpole, so I've got to trill. How do we make it sound as though those ornaments are an elegant part? I think it's crucial to understand what they are there for. I think it's critical to see the function of a trill as being a harmonic thing rather than an instruction to add to the melody or to wiggle frantically at the top. So on that second bar, the chord below it is going to be an A major chord. The note in the bass part is an E at the time. When you start your trill on a D at the top, you've created the most fabulous dissonance. So it's really important that your appoggiatura, the upper note of the trill, comes on the downbeat. It doesn't come before the bar line so that the trill starts on the beat. It has to come on the beat so that you create that dissonance. And the point of the trill is the relief of it falling from that dissonance onto the printed note. So the effect is really a harmonic one. And then suddenly you don't feel quite so silly about starting on the beat and falling down to that trill. Shall we try it from the top? Really, really slowly. We're aiming to start the trill on the first beat of the second bar. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. How long should your upper note be? I would argue it should always be longer than you think. I think you need plenty of time to enjoy that before we get the effect of that. And then you don't need a huge amount of time to just decorate it at the end. We're not trying to get as many wiggles in as we possibly can. So you have to, within that minimum, there's time to make the dissonance, there's time to relax, and there's time to decorate just a little bit. Let's do it again. So we're 1, 2, 3. Should we go on? What is this enflé about then in bar 3? So Menuet is a dance. The dance step comes in 2 bar sections. So the first beat of the bar is the most important, but the first beat of every other bar is the really most important. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, and that enflé comes on the 3rd bar. So it comes on the strongest one. So I think all it's looking for is a little bit of extra something on that most important of the 2 downbeats in the 2 bar section of Menuet step. So we're just going to put a bit of weight on the bow with the finger that's on the hair. And then in the 4th bar, the mordant needs to come on the beat. And it's there, I think, whereas a trill I think has a harmonic function, I think a mordant has a more rhythmic feeling to it. And again, in this dance style, it's got a real lift to it. It really sort of adds to the airiness, adds to the character. You can make your mordants very mournful, and in another piece, that would be a much more appropriate speed for that to go at. But here, I think it's there to add to the lift, the elegance, the sweep of the dance. So bar 3 is going to have weight on it. And the downbeat of bar 4 has just got a little decoration on it. Just like an extra flick on the end of a letter that you've drawn with a fountain pen, and you just can't resist that extra curl on the end. That's all that is in bar 4. Let's play from the top. So we're 1, 2, 3. On that time when we hadn't discussed it, had we? So the penultimate bar of the section, open string, weight on the top note. That's appropriate, isn't it? Just because it's the highest note we've had so far. And here, again, the harmonic function of the downbeat of that bar. It's an A major chord at the end of the section, where your E fits very nicely at the top. The F has no business in that harmony at all. So make the most of it before you fall onto that as the note that you are supposed to be on. So we're making the most of that. Before we fall, we start our trill slowly, we speed it up a little bit, there's a decoration at the end, and we finish it in time to take a breath, get ourselves back to the tip, and do the repeat. From the top, here we go. I'm conscious that this is a very, very underspeed minuet, but I think that's okay for now. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that has a certain elegance, a certain grace to it. We've got all the ornaments in. We've fundamentally understood why they're there. They feel like they make sense to me. We're massively underspeed though, aren't we? A minuet in real life needs to go considerably quicker than that. But I do think that is a safer way of learning things, under speed but with everything, rather than up to speed and then trying to stick the ornaments in afterwards. So eventually we're going to end up sort of here. But we've got all of that in place at our slow speed. Should we look at the second section? So we begin with an enflé. Just a bit of extra weight, and it's coming on the downbeat, not on the dot. little mordant, just a decoration of the next downbeat, but it's less important than the enflé because it's the second downbeat, not the first. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Everybody's favourite fourth finger trill, sorry. But again, we need to hear that before you trill down. And the F, I think, is a throwaway at the end of that bar. Enflé on the downbeat. And here you need to go for the 3 and the 4, not the C sharp, because we've got to start with the 4 down on the D. Keep the A sounding, so keep the 3 down. And then I would play the final C sharp with a 4, so that you can reach the D minor chord to finish. Second section, nice and steady. 1, 2, 3. How are we feeling elegance-wise? Elegance and grace. So having said that at least some of those ornaments have a harmonic function, it's going to be easier to understand it with a bass line in, isn't it? So why don't we stick to our slow speed? But I'll play the bass so you really get to hear how particularly the downbeat of the trill functions harmonically. So I'm going to play you the continuo part, nice and steady. I'll play it with both repeats so you can test out your elegant ornamentation. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. How are you doing? Shall we try it a bit quicker? Slightly more minuet-y in style. So we'll try 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 sort of thing. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, Should we notch the speed up just once more? Let's try. I'll count 2 bars in. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.